Well, good morning, crew. How you guys doing? Wow, that's pretty good. All right. Man, these are all the places we're going today. We're juking our way through the Bible. It's going to be awesome. So, got a lot to do, so I'm going to pray right now so we can get underway. Let's do it together. Jesus, man, I'm asking for your help. I'm asking for your help today because what we're looking at is so important to you. And I know for some of us in this room, this is going to be one of the easiest of all the 10 Commandments to keep. And I know for others of us, this is going to be among one of the most difficult, most challenging, most painful, most soul-prying, most confronting things that we may have to address in this entire series. And so I'm asking for your help. I'm asking for you to remind those of us in this room where this may be challenging, remind us of your grace. Remind us of your forgiveness. Remind us of how far you were willing to go to rescue us, people who were estranged and astray and were rebellious in our heart and broken in our actions. Remind us of the power of grace. Remind us of the power of peacemaking. Remind us of the power of forgiveness. Remind us of what it means to obey you and the reward that comes with that. And so I look for you to really, truly teach and do surgery and guide and give us encouragement and help us to excel in your commands because they are good and they bless our lives and they bless the lives of people in our lives. So we ask you to show up big, to be in our presence, and to do some awesome stuff. And we ask these things in your perfect and kind name. Amen. Well, we are in the book of Exodus, and right now we are in an entire series which is really looking at God's ethical source code, looking at the Decalogue, or as we like to call them, the 10 Commandments, right? And we've been methodically going through one commandment per week, and so for the last month, we've tackled the first 4. Right? And they're real simple. No other gods but the one true God of the Bible. That's number 1. Number 2, you do not want to idolatrize that God, make an idol of that God in any way. Let God be God without his borders that you want to place on him. That's number 2. Number 3, don't use God's name in a way that is meaningless, useless, shallow, or empty. Don't attach his name to things that don't represent his character and his heart, that kind of thing. That's number 3. And then number 4 was last week, which is to honor the Sabbath, to keep it holy, because God is holy and also has a Sabbath that he instilled. Therefore, we live out this idea of rest in Christ and taking rest throughout the week, right? So those have been the first 4. But today, when we open up to Exodus 20, we're going to see that God is shifting gears here, all right? You're going to feel it. It's like God depresses the clutch, moves it from 4th to 5th. Now we're going to be cruising a little bit because he makes a change. See, the first 4 commands are very vertical. They're commands oriented for our relationship to God, right? So he's like, this is what I want you to do when it comes to you and me. This is what I want my community of faith, the church, to do in light of me, right? So they're very vertical. When you look at 6 through 10, they are boldly horizontal. They're how we deal with one another. We don't lie to one another. We don't kill one another, which is a really great way to start the day. Don't kill each other, right? We don't commit adultery. These are very horizontal ideas. But number 5 is kind of a hybrid. It functions in a way that's kind of a bridge between the two worlds. In one sense, it's very horizontal, right? It's going to deal with interpersonal relationship. But it exists in such a way that it's also God's gift to sort of represent himself in the world as well. So it functions as a bridge between the 2 different batches of commandment. And so this is a high voltage command. And I would say it's a high voltage command that is society shaping in its overtones and proportions. And so, I am in Exodus chapter 20 now. You can follow along in our app if you like. We have notes in the app. You can do that. You can simply open your Bible to the second piece of literature in the Bible, the book of Exodus, and we are in the 20th chapter. That's where the 10 commandments are. But this is how the 5th commandment opens up. It says, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving to you. Now, I want you to notice right off the back, the first thing about this that's interesting is it's in the positive. Just like the Sabbath last week, this one is not saying don't do this. It's saying here's what you need to do. And I know when we first hear this, we go, yes, that's nice, that's good, that seems respectful. And so, yeah, I get behind this. God wants us to honor our parents. Great. Got it locked in. But here's where I want to kind of shape our thinking a little bit. If the 10 Commandments are structured by God in kind of a descending order of priority, right? One true God, don't make any idols of that God, don't use his name in a poor or inappropriate way, keep the Sabbath holy because, again, that keeps us connected to God, then it's odd that this one comes before adultery and murder and lying and theft. In other words, if they are in the descending order, God seems to be saying that this command may have more magnitude than we typically give. In other words, in the list, it's huge. It's critical to our life development. It's critical to what we're supposed to do. And if you look at other passages in the Bible that are actually in the negative, you begin to see how important the idea of honoring and respecting parents really is. In fact, later in Exodus, you will see that the failure to do this results in a rock pounding. That's bad. If you go to Romans chapter 1, you will see that the failure to do this is a description of moral bankruptcy. If you go to 1 Timothy 5, you will see a failure to do this is worse than being a person who rejects God, right? So suddenly that puts this in a context that says, hey, this is pretty important. It's of significant consequence. It's a big thing, right, in the list of the 10. Now, what's cool about this is it's the only command in the list that really says, here's what you're supposed to do. And here is the result or the blessing of doing it. So a lot of them are just do this or don't do that, and that's all there is to it. Here we actually see that there's a blessing. But before we unbox all of that, right, why we're supposed to do it, what it means to do it, I want us to start a little bit more foundational. I want us to kind of take a step back in this and go, why does being on the honor roll matter? This is all about being on God's honor roll when it comes to honoring our parents. And I want us to kind of just take a minute to build a case for this. And this is something that, as I was working it through this week, I was like, yeah, why is this one so central and so critical? Now, many of us have said or heard that the family is the building blocks of society. It's the cornerstone of all culture. And I think all of us are going to agree with that. I don't know of anybody that's going to say, no, I disagree, that can't be true. But the question is, why is it true? Like, is it just like we just take it for granted, or is there some real substance to why that is a central idea and central theme? Well, I say that it is critical and central, and let me see if I can break this down a little bit. Number 5 is a family command, right? So it's all oriented around that nucleus and that kind of bubble that exists within all of society, and therefore, it is a command that deals with the root. I want you to catch this. It deals with the root of all social interaction, right? So all social interaction at its root begins in that nucleus of the family. And so how a family raises adults, which, by the way, you're not raising kids. You're raising adults. Write that down. You don't raise kids. You raise adults. That's your master plan, right? So how a family raises adults and how you as a kid respond to being raised into an adult is going to be of significant importance. It sets the pattern for your future life. Or if you're a parent, you're setting the pattern for the life of a future adult. And I'm going to go a step further, and this one's going to be uncomfortable for many who have young kids. But I really have come to the conclusion that by the time our kids are about 10 years old, you're done raising them. And then you begin to just coach them, right? Right? They start to get a mind of their own. They start to go through all sorts of stuff. Hormones kick in and brain falls out and all, It's this whole new ride, you know what I mean? And honestly, by 10 or 11, the pattern is set. A lot of research is showing that that's really it. Once they hit that age, man, it's a new game, it's a new transformation. They're coming out of the cocoon, and it's not always a butterfly, you know? Right? It's just true. And so now you get to coach along. So the early years are really, really important in this whole process. Especially, like I said, because it's society shaping. Now, here's why. As you are raising your kids into adults, here's what you are as a parent. You are their first teacher. And you are their first school. And you are their first doctor. You're their first boss. You're actually their first friend. Right? You're a whole series of firsts. You're the first coach. You are the first legislator. And you are the first police officer. And you're the first judge. And you are the first prison warden. Right? You are. Go to your room, stand in the corner, whatever it is. You're the first prison warden. Right? You are a series of firsts. Your marriage is the first marriage they're going to see. That's true. Their siblings are going to be their first neighbors, and you get to help coach them on that. Their siblings are going to be their first enemies, and you get to coach them on that. Their first fight is going to happen in your home, and their first reconciliation is going to happen in your home. Right? So when you start to look at it that way, there's all this weight suddenly. It says all of the regular components of society that makes the world go round, it's all like this live fire exercise in your house. You're preparing them, you're equipping them, you are instilling in them all the things that they're going to need in order to navigate this well, right? And so that puts a certain amount of weight on parents, right? Because again, what you're really doing is, again, instilling all of those ethics. And from that, we're going to know if those things stuck as they turn into adults. And equally, us as adult kids, to the degree that we honor our parents, shows how well their principles stuck. Right? So all of that is just in the mix of what is driving this command. That's why I say it's not a light command. And so even to understand this a little bit, the fifth commandment is not necessarily a command for the front row here, right? The students, though it's true to the students. But when God gives this to Moses, this is a command for adult kids to their parents too. So it applies across the board. When you're young, hey, it's more of a kind of a mentorship command. But when you're older, it's still somewhat of a maintenance type command. We still do this. And so with that in mind, we go back to what it says. Honor your father and your mother. And this word honor, in the original Hebrew language, it just means weighty or heavy. That's what it means. But the idea behind it here is dignity or being respectful, seeing them as significant or seeing them as important. If you flipped it, it would be like, don't treat them lightly. Don't treat them as having little consequence in your life. There is a sense in which you go, there is a weight behind who they are in my life because God placed them in my life intentionally and sovereignly to be a part of this growing me into adult. So they are there, and in that space, I show them this sense of weighty honor in my life, right? Now, some of you are saying, You've never seen my parents, have you, Matt? To really respect and honor. I mean, I look at my father, and he gets out there and he mows the lawn in like a plaid shirt and striped shorts and wears dress socks with loafers and his hat backwards and looks like a fool. You want me to honor that? You know, and others are like, you've not seen my mom. She wears a necklace that has these small boulders from the Southwest all around her neck. And she wears glasses that are 2/3 the size of her face. And you're supposed to just have me like just honor that. And I go, yes, because even though they have no style, they are still your parents, right? And so, yes. But there are others in the room that I know right now that, all jokes aside, you hear this command, and instantly, as I start to go through this talk, there's anxiety, or there's frustration, or there's this sense of resistance, or defensiveness, or dilemma, right? Self-justification. Where you're hearing this and you're seeing it on the screen and you're like, but you don't know my story, Matt. You don't know my story. You don't know the pain of my story. You don't know the heartbreak of my story. You don't know the oppression of my story. You don't know the aching that's in my story. You don't know the circumstances of my story. You don't know what my parents did. You don't know the words they said. You don't know the abuse that was inflicted on me. You don't know. You don't know about the fact that my mother turned a blind eye when her boyfriend was molesting me. You don't know. You don't know my story where my father would get drunk and say terrible things and every once in a while go off the handle. You don't know my story. You don't know my story about how they were constantly never pleased with my actions. I can never measure up, or they were never around, or they were completely detached, or they favored my siblings more than me, or they put undue pressure. I never could do it right. Like, everybody is going to have some story in their life. And I go, you know what, you're right. I don't know your story. I don't know your story. I know my story. And from my story, I can say, I can appreciate your story. See, my story is real simple. My parents divorced when I was 7, and they went off in separate trajectories of poor parenting. Right? My mom went one direction, my dad went another direction. And my whole life I spent trying to, with my father, get him to be pleased with me. And it seems like every time I tried, I failed. No matter what I did, I can never measure up. I can never quite have the connection with him. I remember I was 24 years old. I became a lead pastor in a church, which was really young to have that kind of responsibility. And I remember going, finally, my father's going to be pleased with me. Finally, he's going to be like, well done. You've done it, son. And so I was so excited about this, I had the church fly him up to speak at my installation service. And so he speaks at the service. And then afterwards, I go before him, and I'm waiting for the, you did it. And his first words to me after the installation service was, you really should lose weight. Okay, I'll work on that. Nothing else, just that was it. You really should lose some weight. Okay, thanks. I guess 24 entering that position, still not enough yet. And I continued to struggle and fight and resist and try to please and everything else. It's just hard, right? So that was my father. And then, again, my mom, who's a wonderful lady, married a guy that at that time was a very angry guy that struggled with alcohol. And that was a weird deal. He was very angry. That physical anger would materialize in the home. It's weird to be 12 years old and find yourself in a fist fight with an adult. It's weird. Messes with you. So I can say wholeheartedly, I understand the parental problem. Now, what's kind of weird is I have a good relationship with my stepfather now. You know, in time, he's kind of evened out and made changes and eventually even came to Christ and all of this. And so that's leveled out. I have no relationship with my father. I haven't talked to him for 8 years. Now, here's why I say all of that. This command still counts for me. I cannot say, well, my circumstance then exempts me from having to worry about this. I'm not allowed to do that. The command is the command regardless of my circumstances, regardless of my conditions. It confronts me, it deals with me, but it still stands. Now, do I do this well? Do I nail this one every time? No, I do not. I don't do it well in my heart. I don't always do it well in my actions, but it's the bullseye. Right? It's what I'm still called to shoot for regardless of the situation. I still have to honor them. Now, what does honor look like? how are we to live on the parental honor roll? What are some things that we're to do? Now, I'm going to give some just really fast-moving points this morning that you can kind of wrestle through on your own. But they're going to come quick, and I think they are helpful. They've been helpful for me. And the first one is challenging, at least for some of us. The first one, number one in your notes, is respect them. Respect them, regardless of the quality of the relationship. Now, in other places in the Bible, it'll tell children to obey their parents, and that's really for kids that are younger, under the protection of their parents, before they're out on their own, right? Obey your parents, and that's for that particular thing. Here's what's tricky here. Asking adult kids to honor their parents, ready? It's harder than obey. Honor is harder than obey, and here's why. You can obey and still resent. You can't resent and honor. You can't hate and honor. You can hate and obey, but you can't hate and honor, right? That's where this one goes deeper. This one is in essence saying, hey man, the way you honor God is by honoring your parents, because that's reflecting God's character in your life. That's where God's put you, that's where God's put them, and when you honor them, you're honoring Him. That would be the spirit of the whole thing. In fact, in Proverbs chapter 19, it says this: children who mistreat their father or chase away their mother are an embarrassment and a public disgrace. Like, Solomon had opinions on this, and he had a dad that wasn't always perfect, by the way. His dad was David. Guy stepped in it a few times. And when I say stepped in it, I mean poop. That's what I mean, all right? He stepped in it. And yet he knows this is how we should see it. In fact, later he says this is a good one. This is a good one to remember. The eye that mocks a father and despises a mother's instruction will be plucked out by the ravens of the valley and eaten by the vultures. That is something you don't want. Just say no to that, all right? So, now I know for some of you, respect is easy for your folks because you go, man, my parents are awesome. They were there, they were aware, they were attentive, they poured into me, they had nothing but words of encouragement. I didn't feel overly pressed. I mean, they had the right kind of just putting the ball between the uprights in my life. That was perfect. You know, then here's my thing for all of you that have that, man, then really lean into respecting them. Since you already have that, man, make sure they know how much you do, right? You've got that one easy. Nail that one. Take it to the bank. That is fantastic. There's going to be others in the room that say, Matt, based on what my parents did, my mother, my father, whatever it was, step-parent, grandparent that raised me, whatever, based on what they did, I do not have any respect for them. I just don't respect them. They didn't earn it. They've lost my respect. I don't respect them. And I'd say, you know what? Then here's what I'm asking. You may not feel that emotion of admiration and respect. But what you can do is be respectful toward them. You don't necessarily have to, and I don't even think this is ordering you to have the emotion of, man, I admire you. But it is saying, hey, you need to be respectful toward them because of who God is and how God has placed them in your life, and therefore you show your respect to God by respecting them. Because of this, God is well pleased. And so respect is the first critical key thing that you are to do. The second one is equally difficult. It's to love them. It's to love them regardless of the emotions you feel. Now again, like I said, some of you are like, dude, this message is not for me. I love my parents. Good, let them know. When you go home today, call them. Mom and Dad, you know what? You rock, you're awesome. I love you, even though you're out there in those socks and loafers and stripes and plaids. Right? Mom, I love you, even though you put the corniest stuff on Facebook that drives me crazy. I love you. Right? You pour it on. But for those of you that have a complicated and rocky relationship, I have an honest piece of advice. I want you to treat your parents like your worst enemy. If you have a really, really complicated relationship, you've got a lot of stuff inside, I want you to treat your parents like your worst enemy. And then you look at Luke 6. Jesus says, but I say to you, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. Jesus, I hate this. All right, so, right? Treat them like an enemy then. Because again, it all rolls back to the same thing. This is what you're supposed to do. Now again, you may not feel love, but you don't have to feel love to do loving things. So, hey, they called you a lot of names. I remember every single day growing up, I was called a plethora of names per day, right? So plenty of internal baggage to deal with in life, right? And then what's it tell me to do with the person that called me all of those names? Do good to them, bless them, even though they may have cursed me. Pray for those who abused you. Okay, I can do that, right? So again, it's not easy, but it's clear, right? It's clear. And the thing is, when you decide to do this is even, again, kind of going into my personal story with my stepfather, the more I decided to try to do that, the more healing there was, right? Sometimes we want to just leave wounds open. You know, and it's really counterintuitive to actually say, I'm going to bless and do good and pray for the person that inflicted wounds. Right? Like you go, no, I would rather just resent and feel like, you know what, they wronged me and I'm going to hold them imprisoned in that space. Right? And that's going to keep you in prison, right? But there's something about these words of Jesus that are very otherworldly, very counter-reflex. But Jesus is saying, hey, this is the way we do it different. And when we do it different like this, actually, there really is blessing for the individual that does it. And so we can love, even if they are our enemy. Love your enemy. The next one's also important. Number 3, care for them, regardless of the quality of their care for you. 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 8, it says, but if anyone does not provide for his relatives, especially for the members of his own household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Ouch. Ouch. And again, you got to take this command at the face value of it's not saying based on if they're worthy. This is about our witness, our worship, and our wholeness. Right? Because the quality of our faith is not displayed in doing easy things. The quality of our faith is always going to be displayed when we choose to do the hard, where something inside us is almost like we're pulsed at it, like, man, I don't want to do that, but the Bible tells me to do that, and I have to believe that if I do that, God is going to honor that in some way. And it brings great worship and glory to Him, even though it's hard for me. And realistically, because it's so hard for me, it's almost like more worshipful. Right? And so this is where we care. We care for them materially and emotionally and physically. I think about people I know in our church. There's one individual I think of, a friend of mine. He's awesome. He's this man's man, just really an admired guy, everything else. And when his mother was getting ready to pass away, here's this man's man down on his knees with his mother, clipping her toenails because she had a lot of pain, but that made her giggle. And he just would clip her toenails, right, just to care for his mother, right? Or I think about another lady who actually would care for her father-in-law. It wasn't even her father, it was her father-in-law. And actually, he was the stepfather of her husband. And he had Parkinson's, and she would bathe him and care for him and take care of him and just would make that investment and let the kids see that's how we're going to choose to care for and love. I mean, these are ways in which parents are honored even though it's hard. They're cared for even though it's inconvenient. Right? This fulfills the 5th commandment. The 4th way we can do this is we can esteem them regardless of how much they wounded you. Matthew chapter 15. Jesus is in this debate with the religious mucky mucks because they're always there to cause trouble. And they're debating issues of the law and everything else. And so Jesus answers them. He says, why do you break the commandment of God for the sake of your tradition? He says, God commanded you, honor your father and mother, and whoever reviles father or mother must surely die. This is off the mouth of Jesus. He's like, to revile your parents is worthy of death. And he quotes that. He's throwing down big. He says, but you guys say, if anyone tells his father or mother, well, you know what, listen, I was supposed to take care of you, but I'm going to give it to the church, and I'm not going to give the money to you, and it's totally fine. I don't have to honor you if I'm giving it to the church instead of you. He says, man, for the sake of tradition, you make void the word of God. You're reviling them. Now, Pastor Matt confession time. This one I fail on. So my father, his name's Joel. You know what I call him? I call him Joel. I don't call him Dad. Every time I'm in a conversation with my family, my wife, friends, whatever else, he's not Dad, he's Joel. You know why he's Joel? Because I resent him. I resent him. You don't call a parent by their first name, and it's honoring. You do that to send a message. You say it because they've hurt you, and it's a way you can hurt them. So this is my sin. Right? This is my challenge. This is where I choose to sometimes keep wounds open. This is where I decide to try to kill joy in my life. By saying, you know what, because you haven't been this, and you didn't do that, and you said this, and you act like that, and nothing's really changed, and now I'm self-protecting by some distance that's kind of mutually shared, I'm going to continue to, around other people, call you by your first name to make sure everybody knows we're estranged. I'm sinful. I'm just totally sinful. I'm just confessing it right here, right now, up front. I'm sinful. And I can guarantee you that's going to still be a bit of a battle in me, right? There's going to be times where I'm like, I need to talk about him. Do I call him Dad or I call him Joel? I want to call him Joel, but he's Dad. Ellen and I were having that conversation the other night at Stop in the Cantina, because that's a great place to talk about parental problems. You know, have a margarita and talk about your daddy. All right, so, but it's true. Now, does that mean, in the need to esteem, that we need to make stuff up? No, I don't think you have to make stuff up. As every good mother or kindergarten teacher ever has said, if you have nothing nice to say, right. You know, that's still a form of esteem. I don't have to say something negative. I can smile and nod and just kind of do that round thing, you know, I mean, whatever it is, right? But I can do that, and that would still be to esteem, because you know what? It's choosing self-restriction so as to allow for esteem still, even in my silence, as opposed to choosing to slander because of a lack of self-control and restraint, right? And so I can guarantee you, I can esteem, I can honor, I can respect in silence, but I can't when I decide to open my big pie hole and say something dumb. I can't do it then. Then it's just slander, right? So this is where we kind of need to see some of this, right? Maybe another thing that kind of dovetails in this, maybe you have interactions with your parents, but there's baggage and stuff like that. Don't make a habit of letting them know all the ways they let you down, right? Like if you have to have a conversation for the purpose of healing, like you're wanting relationship again. You want it to be healed and done and fixed. Man, have that conversation. But it's like every time, and you know what you did? You didn't take me to Disneyland. I told you 12 times. You didn't take me to Disneyland as a kid, and I'm wounded. Right? Whatever your thing is. Right? Like if you're doing that all the time and you're just letting them know how they failed you, that's just, again, that's not showing this proper respect and esteem. It's not a way to honor them. And then number 5, encourage them. Encourage them by living well before them. Proverbs 23 says, the father of the righteous will greatly rejoice He who fathers a wise son will be glad in him. Let your father and your mother be glad. Let her who bore you rejoice. What this means is, man, make decisions that make them proud. Say no to things that you know would bring them grief. Realize it whether you like it or not. What you do is a reflection on them. You may say, well, I don't want it to be a reflection on them, but it's the way they're going to feel. It's how it's going to work, right? Consider your decisions as you are moving in life in such a way you go, how would this make them feel based on the decision I am making? Live in such a way that you give them something to brag about. I'd say one of the great ways as adult kids we can fulfill this particular idea is seek to outshine them as a parent. Seek to do it even better than they did it. Ellen and I talk about this a lot. We said this to our oldest who's married. We're like, we really do hope you do this better than we did. You want to truly honor us? Man, outshine us. We would love that. That would bring us great joy because there's always ways to improve. See, these are all the ways that we can choose to honor, to be honorable in the process, right? Now, part of this that I think it's important is it's not just about placing responsibility on kids to honor. I'm going to take this command and flip it a little bit. It also means, as parents, it's doing things in such a way that you make it easy for your kids to honor you. Right? So being honorable parents to make it easier for your kids to do the honoring. Now, it's still their command. They still need to honor, but you want to be honorable in the process. And so how do we keep our kids on the parental honor roll? I'm going to give you a couple of things really fast here that I think are important. Here's the first thing as parents, especially if you're raising adults, you're in that process of life. Here's what you want to do with your kids. But you can also do it as adults because some adult parents sometimes can be a bit overbearing with their kids and they miss this point. So here's what you want to do. Number 6 in your notes. Pour in. Don't simply swoop in. Pour into your kids. Don't simply swoop in and jump your kids, so to speak. Deuteronomy chapter 6. It says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and your soul, your mind, and your might. These words I command you today that they shall be on your heart. And here's what you're going to do. You're going to teach them diligently to your children. You shall talk of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the wayside and when you lie down and when you rise up, right? Here's the deal. We are followers in training. We are fit people, right? Followers in training, raising followers in training. Right? So just as we are on a journey to follow Jesus, we are seeking to impart that same journey to those that we are commissioned to pour into as parents, right? So we want to pour into them. Not simply swoop in. Here's some things that this means. Less rules. Less rules, more relationship. Right? That's critical. Less because I say so. And more, here's why this is better. And here's why you want it so. Right? So it's a shift in tone. Doesn't allow us to be quite as lazy. I said so is really convenient. But it's not really shaping and pouring and aiding and helping. Maybe less expectations and more explanations. This is why it helps you. This is why it's beneficial in your life and really unpacking that, right? That's a way that we can pour in, not simply swoop in. Closely aligned with this is number 7, draw out, don't chew out. Colossians chapter 3, verse 21, fathers, do not provoke your children. Some versions say exasperate, lest they become discouraged. In the previous point, I said we are followers in training, raising followers in training. This point is a little bit more simple. We are sinners raising sinners. Right? We have the potential to be just as sinful in our parenting as our kids can be in being parented. And so under this particular heading, it means we want to leverage empathy more than shame. Empathy more than shame. Understanding more than demand. You want to come alongside more than descend from above. You want to aid versus accuse. because the priority is their heart more than their behavior. The message is grace more than the message is law. And your goal, ready? It's not to have good kids. It's to have godly adults. That's your goal, right? So you go, this is why I want to be honorable as a parent, so that my kids can honor me as a parent. And all of this is for the reward of the honor roll. Going back to Exodus chapter 20, we see that being on the honor roll first offers longevity. Offers longevity, right? It says, honor your father and mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving to you. People are always looking for like the fountain of youth and what's the way to stay young forever. Well, apparently it's honoring your parents. You don't need creams, you don't need pills, you don't need exercise regimens or diets. You need to honor your folks. That's what it comes down to, right? It's real simple. Time magazine recently even did a thing on who has the highest rate of longevity, who's got the best longevity. And what they found, it's people in faith-based communities that take their faith seriously, in particular the core tenets of their faith. They live the longest. Pretty cool. Science has proven faith. We win! All right, so when science proves your faith, you feel good on that particular Monday morning. All right, so that's critical, longevity. But the other is stability, right? Being on the honor roll offers stability. That's number 9 in your notes. In Deuteronomy 5:16, you see the 10 Commandments reiterated on the plains of Moab, right? And there's a slight change in those. It says, honor your father and mother as the Lord your God has commanded you, that your days may be long and it may go well with you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Not only that you live long, but it may go well, because it kind of stinks to live long and it bites, right? That's when you're just like, I can't wait to die. I won't die, though. It just keeps beating, and it's terrible, you know? Like, no, man, this is saying it's going to go well with you. And what I find is it's true. Anytime I seek to be a peacemaker, anytime I want to minimize the drama, I want to minimize the stress, I want to minimize the distraction and division, and I lean in and say, all right, I want to do this right, even though it's hard, it always goes better. And I believe it goes better because that's where God's presence and power and just his overall goodness is felt when we do the right thing, even if it's the hard thing. And so in light of that, I just want to read off some diagnostic questions really quick, and I close with this. First question, do I take my parents seriously? Do I take them seriously? Who they are, where they're at? What they're like? Do I take it seriously? Do my attitudes and actions reflect honor? Honor as we've been able to define it today. Is there some baggage that I need to banish? I just need to deal with, whether I go to them, deal with it, or in my heart, I toss it in a hole and it's gone. Do I need to deal with that stuff? Is there some capital I need to invest? Might be relational capital, emotional capital, financial capital, I don't know, but is there capital that needs to be invested? Is there character I need to cultivate? Like for me, I need to cultivate not having this sense of I need to punish somebody that I don't even talk to, right? There's some things I need to cultivate. And is there some time I need to spend? Right? Do I just need to hang out, take them to lunch, call them on the phone? It's really easy to say, well, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it next week when I got more free time. But maybe it's not. I need to spend some time today. Because what Jesus calls us to today, every day, all the time, in every way, somehow is to honor our parents. And when we do that, we honor him. Let's pray together. Jesus, help us to do this. Help me to do this. Help me to get over myself. Help me to not try to play you. Rather, help me to be like you and to honor you by honoring those that you've placed in my life. We seek your mercy and your grace in your perfect name. Amen.